Special education has made leaps and gains as it has evolved into what we are familiar with today. Throughout the first century of U.S. history, education did not exist as we now know it. Children started work very early in life during the Industrial Revolution. Before the growth of industry, children were educated at home by their parents and trained in the family business. Independent businesses, much like now, struggle against the efficiency of new machinery, and so many children sought employment in dangerous factories. In 1907, the National Child Labor Committee was created. 2 years later, Lewis Hine published pictures of children working, and this sparked a ban of child employment. With this ban on child labor, public education became more important and mandated. As more children began attending schools, our knowledge of special needs increased. Before 1954, children with cognitive capabilities considered lower than a 5-year-old or physical disabilities were either institutionalized or left at home. Children with special needs were not the only children excluded from schools. Minorities were equally excluded. This minority exclusion led to the court case Brown v. Board of Education, which ruled that separate but equal, which had been used to support segregation, was not equal. Brown v. Board of Education fueled the civil rights movement, but also the lesser-known Quiet Revolution for people with disabilities. In 1965, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, or Public Law 8910, was passed, giving funding for states to assess and educate some students with special needs. In 1971 and 1972, 2 court cases ruled in favor of students with special needs, making it illegal to refuse to educate children with mental ages below 5, and determining that inadequate resources were not an excuse to deny education to students with special needs. In 1973, Section 504 was passed, giving individuals with special needs the right to vote, employment, education, and access to public buildings. Public Law 94142 is one of the most important pieces of legislation that affects students with special needs. Originally named the Education for All Handicapped Children Act, this law began mandated special education. This law included several different improvements affecting children with special needs, including the following: a free appropriate public education, or FAPE, provided at no cost to the family, a child find system created to identify children with special needs, the right to non-biased assessment and placement, funding, a monitoring system for educational programs, the creation of the Individualized Education Plan, or IEP, parent rights to involvement in the special education process, the right of students to be educated with their peers to the greatest extent possible, which is now a concept known as the least restrictive environment, and speech services were now classified under the umbrella of special education. Public Law 94142 was later renamed the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. Public Law 99457, or the Early Childhood Education Act, brought about funds for children with disabilities between the ages of birth and 2 years, and the creation of the Individualized Family Service Plan. In 1988, the medical model was replaced with the cognitive development model. In 1990, amendments were made to IDEA, adding autism as a special needs category and bringing about People First language, which is using the phrase a child with autism rather than an autistic child, because people should not be defined by their disabilities. In 1997, IDEA was reauthorized and included provisions for inclusive practices, transitioning from the school to the community, and proactive approaches to behavioral problems. The greatest challenge of this reauthorization was funding. And in 2004, IDEA was renamed the Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act, and several changes were enacted. Some of these changes include paperwork reduction, early intervention, and funding. In 2002, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act was reauthorized and renamed No Child Left Behind. No Child Left Behind required students to meet high academic standards determined by making adequate yearly process on standardized exams. No Child Left Behind resulted in several components that worked and several that did not. The 3 things that worked were that schools began using data to make educational decisions, the needs of special populations such as English language learners or students with special needs were exposed, and it helped show that new approaches were needed to assist students in special populations. 3 things that did not work were the extreme rigidity of the accountability system, an unrealistic expectation of 100% proficiency, and some educators began teaching to the test. In 2011, No Child Left Behind became the Elementary and Secondary Education Act once again. Some of the changes included in this revision are the adoption of college and career readiness standards, a system created to evaluate teacher and principal effectiveness, and more realistic proficiency expectations. Overall, special education has come a long way from its beginnings, and it is still changing. As society grows more accepting of those with special needs, it is likely we will continue to see changes within our education system for a long time to come.